Welcome to Attitude of Altitude podcast presented by Planet of One. This podcast is designed to inspire change in people to become the best versions of themselves and live their best lives. We share stories of struggle and success to encourage and empower listeners to be bold, take action, and be the change we desire to see in this world. We are all part of this planet. We are all a planet of one. Know that your attitude determines your altitude in life. Welcome to the podcast. How are you today then, Tamar?
I'm doing good. I now understand though how people who are entrepreneurs, they stay busy even when they're at home, right? Because I work full time. And so for me, I have to do everything in the morning or the evening. And I've managed to stay crazy busy, which is awesome this whole weekend. I'm like, it's funny how that happens.
And that's your week off. That's the time you're taking off, actually, right?
It is. I know yesterday I had an interview scheduled, but they were like 15, almost 20 minutes late. And I finally said, okay, I got to cut out. And they're like, oh, we can do it now. I said, I'm sorry. I'm like, I've got stuff to do today. We'll just reschedule to next week.
Well, welcome, Tamar. Let me actually introduce to the audience. I actually have a fantastic person with us today, Tamar Medford. She is the podcast host of Road to Health. And it's wonderful to actually have someone with me that is also a podcaster. She's a champion for people who suffer from addiction. That's because she has gone through her own journey of recovering from addiction for 20 years. In 2012, she began to change her life. So welcome, actually, Tamar. Please say hello to our audience.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super honored that I get to be on the show.
Thank you so much. I want the audience to actually get to know you a little bit. So would you take us through a little bit of the journey of how did you even get into addiction? What age were you and what thoughts were going through your head? And the reason I'm asking that tomorrow is so if there is someone listening, they can see some of the things that in our mind we begin to go through. Please take us through part of that journey.
Absolutely. Well, I always like to start off by sharing that I had an amazing upbringing. I lived with a family. I was actually born in the Netherlands and we immigrated to Canada when I was only a year old. So I've lived in Canada for most of my life. And my parents spent a lot of time with us. You know, they were very loving. I have a younger brother as well. And after my dad decided to chase his passion of becoming a filmmaker because he was actually a baker before that, which is great as a kid because I got all the free donuts that a child could want, which was incredible. But we started moving around quite a bit and I got incredibly shy. I started to feel like I didn't fit in because I was always having to make new friends. And, I always knew I would make new friends anywhere we went, but I felt like we weren't really situated in a place for long enough that I could develop these really close friendships, right, where you have this connection. And so I remember going into high school and I was terrified because I was like, oh, I'm not going to know anybody. And it's different when you're in elementary school than when you go to high school because it's a whole new world and you're not just in one class all year long with your friends. And so I remember it was just a really awkward start. I was a fairly good student at that time and, I had some friends, but I really didn't feel like I belonged. And at the age of 14, I actually went to a party with some friends because, of course, I was trying to find my way. And I had had sips of alcohol before because it's not something that is frowned upon, right? We're European, and so you start drinking at a very young age, and it's not something that's bad. And, my parents would always let us have sips of their alcohol. But when I got drunk that first time, I remember feeling like my world went from black and white to color. And it was as though I just had gained this confidence I'd never felt before. And I felt like I belonged. I was happy, right? I say funny things and people laughed at my jokes. And for the first time, I felt like I was getting something that I really wanted, right? Which was that connection and that almost, I had always looked for my dad's approval, but it was like, okay, now you're one of the cool kids, right? You're being approved, you're in. And I felt like I was that person that other people wanted me to be, right? Because I didn't know who I was at the time. And the unfortunate part was I was not afraid to put anything in my body after that point. I people would offer me some type of drug and I would take it because this is exciting, right? And most people, they'll have a couple drinks and they start to feel a little bit fuzzy and they're like, "Ooh, okay, I'm feeling out of control now and I have to stop." But for me, I felt more in control the more drinks I had. And I started to chase that feeling because it felt so good, right? And I think that's the, important thing to note about somebody who struggles with addiction. They respond to drugs and alcohol much differently than, people who don't have that problem. And alcoholism runs in my family, unfortunately, not directly with my parents. So I was very fortunate not to grow up seeing that. But, when I'd visit our family, it wasn't abnormal for people to be just completely wasted and having a good time. I thought, well, this is life, right? And so that's essentially, how I got started in my addiction. And it was just because I loved alcohol because of the way it made me feel. It just made me feel alive.
Did your parents notice a change in you at that point? Did they pay attention? Was that something that mattered at that point?
My dad was really busy with his career and he used to travel quite a bit. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, so we were very lucky that way. But I think she noticed, but they just kind of thought that, well, this is kind of the norm. And they were actually, I didn't know it at the time, but they were very close to separating, right? Because there was a lot of, my dad traveling a lot, my mom staying home with us. There was a lot of kind of turmoil going on that we weren't 100% aware of. And so I think they saw kind of things kind of go downhill, but they didn't think it was abnormal, right? They just thought, oh, she's in a phase and she's just having fun. And I hid it a lot. I lied a lot,
Mm.
And they recently read my book before I published it, and they were a little bit shocked, but they were aware something was going on. They just never knew really to the depth that it happened.
At the time you were going through that, when you first began drinking, could anyone have told you otherwise not to drink? Would you have
No.
listened?
No, not at all. It's, when you have that drink, you're chasing that feeling. And until you hit a point, I think, where you hit your bottom and you realize enough's enough and you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, no one can tell you to stop. And, I had people all throughout my addiction beg me to stop. And I was like, I don't have a problem. It's just a bad night, like it's okay. And they're like, but you keep doing this to yourself. Why? Right? So, yeah, no, unfortunately not. It doesn't really happen that way.
I asked that question because, as human beings, the first thing when you just said it, when someone sees someone else, they immediately jump to an advice mode. And I want the audience to truly understand that if that person is not ready to hear it,
Mhm.
they're not going to hear it at that moment till they're ready for it. So, how long did it take you before you began to really decide that, yes, I do have an issue?
20 years. After I graduated high school, a lot of my friends were starting to go to college and university, and I had tried, but, I was more interested in going to the pub during class than I was attending class. And I always just blamed it on, well, I'm not smart enough, right? I'm not meant to be here, kind of thing. And so, as all my friends were starting to make something of their lives, I was starting to surround myself with people who were the same as I was. And so it really just became the norm. And things really changed when I started to use harder drugs. I had been introduced to them one night and it was just like, wow, I can drink more, and I ended up in places that now, when I look back, make me sick to my stomach because I always thought, well, I'm a classy drinker, right? I'm fancy. I have a good upbringing. I'm not your stereotypical addict or alcoholic that lives under a bridge and sips out of a brown paper bag like people think that we do, right? But I had reached some places where, thinking back now, I think, oh my gosh, like I can't picture me being there. And today it's hard when I share my story for people look at me, they're like, are you kidding? Because they don't see me as that person, but I was. And the addiction for me ran right into my food life. I was terribly addicted to food. I had done dieting so extreme that I could have killed myself, because I was always seeking to fix what was on the outside so it would naturally, right, heal what was going on the inside. I mean, if I was beautiful and I was thin, then people would love me and it would be okay. Well, that's not what my life was. And I would fluctuate, anywhere from 40 to 75 pounds. So I decided to get married. I thought, well, you know what, that's going to fix everything. I'm just going to find a husband. I'm going to fall in love. Well, he was an alcoholic as well. And we were together for about 9 years. And during that 9 years, although he was an alcoholic as well, I was a blackout drunk, right? And so he would get so mad at me for blacking out and just, I didn't remember half the evenings that we would be out. And I remember he left me in the bathtub once because I decided I was going to have a bath, right, when we got home. And I don't remember any of this. And I woke up with water up to my chin. And he had left me there and gone into the other room because that is how upset he would get when I ended up like that. And we ended up getting about $75,000 in credit card debt, and we had a car that we couldn't afford. We would transfer balances, on our credit cards just to pay one so we wouldn't get hounded by creditors. And, I remember telling him one time that, hey, you know what? I don't want to be alive anymore. Like, I'll just kill myself and you can claim our insurance policy so you can live your life, right? Because I was tired of hurting people and I was tired of living paycheck to paycheck, right? On the outside, people probably thought, wow, they have a nice place, they've got a nice vehicle, but that wasn't the reality. And one night, I just remember sitting on the floor with a bottle of pills, and I had a little dog. His name was Rudy. It was a little pug. And they, kind of latched themselves onto you. And I was just sobbing because I couldn't handle it anymore, right? And I just wanted to end my life. And he looked up at me, and they do this little head tilt thing, right? And it was kind of like just something in his eyes. And I believe now it was complete divine intervention because it was a sign for sure. But he just kind of did that head tilt then and looked up and was like, what are you doing, Mom? Like, kind of like, are you crazy? Like, you're going to end your life with me here? I'm so cute. And something at that moment, though, just snapped inside me. And I had the desire to live, but I knew I had to make some pretty major changes.
Up to that point, were you noticing at all that you're running down the wrong path of your own life? Were you even paying any attention to that? Or was the mindset, I need to get through the day? What were you thinking at those periods?
There was times, I was in a very codependent relationship with another addict that ended up in assault. And there was times in my life where I actually had met people. One of them was my best friend today, and we were best friends in high school. She had come back into my life. And so there was those moments that happened periodically along the way that now I look back and it was definitely signs like, hey, you have a choice, right? A or B. And I would always pick B, right? Because I wasn't ready to stop. And things hadn't gotten painful enough for me to do anything about it, right? And I craved that alcohol. I mean, even if I was blackout drunk and violently ill the following day, the only way for me to feel better was to use or drink again. And so there was times where I would be like, okay, I'm going to stop. And I would actually make bets with friends, right? So if I went a week or two without drinking, I wanted to shout it from the rooftops and tell people. And one of the things that I've learned is that when you don't suffer from addiction, you don't feel the need to tell everybody that you don't have a problem. And I was
Mhm.
always making a point to tell people, I don't have a problem. Like, look at me, right? And I would make $1,000 bets with my friends for a month, and we would pick cheat days along the way because we're like, well, there's a party here and there's a party here, right? But there were certainly signs up until that point. It was just I wasn't ready to recognize them.
So, what began to shift once you had that eye-opening moment with your doc? What began to shift within you?
So I weighed 215 pounds at that point. I was really unhappily married. I still care about my ex-husband, but they're just, things were not good. I didn't have that connection. And I was severely depressed. I had been, on antidepressants throughout my addiction, even though alcohol is a very large depressant. But I think that was enough. And I've been told once that you find your bottom when you stop digging, right? Because I would always compare myself to other people, right? Like, well, I'm not an alcoholic because I haven't lost it all, but clearly I had lost it all, right? And I was mentally and spiritually broken. And so I knew that I had to do something. And so I did what everybody does, right? This happened towards the end of 2011. And 2012, I decided, well, I'm going to get a gym membership, right? I have 75 pounds to lose. I'm going to get in shape and it's going to fix everything inside of me. And so I started working out for that first month and I felt lost, right? Because I'm like, yeah, I'm determined. And trust me, us alcoholics, like when we're on a mission, we're all in and there's
Mhm.
nothing stopping us until we hit a wall. And that's still the same for me today. I just do more positive things where I hit the wall with. But that I knew that I needed a little bit of help and support. I needed a community because I was trying to do it on my own. I felt like, you know what, I'm an adult now. Like I should be able to get everything together on my by myself and if I am to prove that I'm responsible. And so I sucked up my pride. I hired a personal trainer and I started my journey. And little did I know that that person that I met, we actually went to high school together. We were, for 1 year, we were in gymnastics together. We were terrible. So we had a good laugh about that. But she asked me, what's your goal? And I said, I want to get into a bikini and I want to feel comfortable in my own skin and I want to go to a Las Vegas pool party. And she kind of laughed at that, right? But that person who I met would actually help me find recovery in June of that same year. And so I think that was really that turning point where, I still had a lot of troubles that first few months because I would, again, I would brag when I hadn't drank a lot. And because I was an all in person, I would eat chicken, broccoli, and rice every single day. And I was going to be the star student, right? I was going to make her proud. I was going to make everybody around proud because I was seeking that validation from people. And so I would eat really rigidly. And to curb my drinking, I would have 3 beers Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I would come home and drink half a bottle of NyQuil so I would pass out.
Mm.
And I remember telling my trainer, I only had 9 beers this weekend, right? And she laughed because she was also a recovered alcoholic. And she said, well, good for you, right? But she knows that you don't typically, like, no one who doesn't have a problem would even mention that they only had 9 drinks. Because let's be honest, if I were to say I'm going to have 9 Diet Cokes this weekend or 9 Coca-Colas, that seems a little bit insane, right?
Yeah.
But that was kind of that point that really started to shift everything.
And what did you shift within you for you to continue on that recovery journey? Because were you still seeking approval at this time?
I was, but I needed to go down a spiritual path, I truly believe. I had grown up, we weren't religious, we never went to church, but I did get a taste of religion when I was younger and I loved it. But then, of course, you start to develop your own beliefs. And because my parents didn't instill any of that in us, I started to get, well, especially in my life, I'd be like, there's no God because if there was a God, I wouldn't have had to go through everything I did. But I knew that because I say I was the general manager of my universe, right? I wanted to control everything. And my first, the friend of mine that brought me into recovery, she said, Tamar, you need to let go and let God. And I don't care what that looks like for you, but you need to go on the spiritual journey and realize that there is something bigger than you out there that will take care of you, that your needs will be met, that you stop trying to control everything. And I remember we went to a church service and she never went a lot, but I was like, I'm willing to do what it takes to stay sober, right? Because I was white knuckling it that first few months. And she said, I want you to go home and pray because I had started a meditation and a prayer, um, daily routine. And she goes, and you need to basically let go and let God. And I want you to pray for everything you want to see and make it be in like that it comes to you in spotlight, like bright, not subtle because I don't do subtle. And so we went to a service together on Sunday and it was youth pastor. He was very cute. He was handsome. So that was easy to, grab my attention. But as he was speaking, the whole service was about letting go and letting God. And he's like, if you're struggling right now in your life with addiction or anything that has been really chaining you to your past, it's okay. You don't have to run the show, right? You can let, God take care of this for you. And I remember just sitting there and I hated crying. I think that first year I cried more than I ever have before. But at that moment, I was like, okay, there's something greater than me out there. Everything is going to be okay. I don't have to hold on so tightly anymore. I can just start this spiritual journey and realize that I'm not alone in this.
Was it an easy shift for you to go from thinking you had control of everything to beginning to let go and allow things to become? Was that easy for you?
No, not at first. But I remember, somebody asked me once, what does humility mean to you and what does it mean in your sobriety? And I got super offended because I was like, well, I'm the most humble person I know. But apparently you don't say that when you're humble. And I remember going out with a friend and across this, like, it was a big kind of banner, the big word humility was there. And those kind of things kept happening in my life. When I did the actions, I did the prayer, and I asked for guidance, it was inevitable that within a couple days, either a friend would talk to me, and I was like, wow, this is crazy. So I think it slowly happened, but I still thought that if I controlled things, it would work out. But my way of doing things was clearly not working out. So it did take a little bit of time, and there's sometimes I want to pull back that control still today, but it definitely, after that first year, it was a lot easier to know that my needs were met.
So, what did you begin to do that was different for you to go to that recovery and continue staying in recovery?
So the support, first and foremost. I mean, in every area of my life today, I have support groups for, my entrepreneurship journey, for my coaching, I do masterminds and recovery groups and stuff like that. So kind of letting go of that pride and going, okay, you know what? I want to do this with other people. And just the power of being able to talk to people about what you're going through and what you're thinking, because sometimes you just think you're crazy, right? So that was, I think, the first key to being successful in recovery was having the support network and the people who understood where I was. And also, I had to change everybody I surrounded myself with, right? Because I was hanging out with people who were exactly like me. And for the first little bit, I still tried to hang out with those people when they were drinking all evening and stuff. And I remember matching some of them like drink for drink. And I was drinking pop, which is just crazy. So I knew that I had to surround myself with people who had what I wanted. And so I started to watch people and go, okay, you're helping people. I like you, right? Because I always felt like I had more of a purpose in life, but I had no idea what that was because I always thought that my addiction would always affect my future. And, I wasn't highly educated or anything like that. I was just like, but I just thought, no, I'm going to watch what these people are doing. So it was really, and it's true, right? You are most like the people you hang out with. And that really stuck with me. And then creating that routine, right, of prayer and meditation and self-care, which was something I was not very good at, starting to treat my body right, starting to help other people and not be completely self-centered because everything was about me in the first little while, right? So just learning to become other people centered. And if I did things for others, it would always end up rewarding me in some way. And most of the time, it was just being able to see someone get it, like especially when I started off in recovery, that was my first taste of actually helping people, was seeing the light bulb go on and they're owning their past, right? And they're fixing their current situation to develop a better future. And that just filled my cup. Like that was incredible feeling. So it was just creating that routine that was not all about me.
And at the same time, you were recovering yourself, but yet you took on the service side of actually helping and mentoring others to
Yeah.
go through their journey. And you said something earlier about when you're in that time frame where you think it's always going to be that way. What was that switch point that allowed you to go, no, it's not always going to be this way? What was that for you? Do you know?
That happened actually in 2019 because I've been sober for about 8.5 years now. And I had, started to turn my life around. Everything was good. I was helping other people, but I still felt like I had more in me, and I wasn't sure what that was. And, after that first year, I had lost 75 pounds. So I felt really good about myself. My husband and I had separated, so things were okay there and we were still friends. And I lost everything. I was financially, mentally, spiritually bankrupt. But for the first time, I felt like I had a clean slate, right? And I could create a life I wanted. But I felt like after that first year, I graduated, right? And things were good. I got this kind of thing. And so I got complacent over the next, I'd say, 5 to 6 years. And my weight started to fluctuate again because I wasn't doing exactly what I was doing before. And I had gone so hardcore that it was hard to go back there, right? Which has been part of my journey today, is doing what's right for me and my body. But I went to a friend of mine in early 2019 and I'm like, I'm lacking this motivation that I had, years ago, and I miss it. And we had a really good chat. And she said, why don't you listen to podcasts? And I'd never, believe it or not, early 2019, I didn't know what a podcast was. I'd heard of them, but I never knew what they were. And so I started looking into podcasts because I was like, this is pretty cool. Like, it's like a little mini education for myself that I can just listen to whatever I want. And I found our mutual friend Adam Shively and the Million Pound Mission. And I remember just hearing his coaching calls with his clients. And I was like, I can relate to that. I can relate to that. So I started to get that same feeling that I had when I first went into recovery. It was like that relatable experience, right? So I joined one of his communities and I started to meet all these amazing like-minded people. And he had an event down in Los Angeles in Huntington Beach in September of last year. And so I decided to go with somebody I had met in the group because she lived down in San Jose. So she was going to drive down. And we went to this event. And I was terrified because it was way out of my comfort zone. I didn't really know anybody, including the friend that I had gone to meet. We had never met in person. And so we got to meet all these podcasters. And I remember sitting there just being in awe because I'd heard about them and I was like, this is really cool. We got to meet Adam and we got invited out for dinner that evening. And one of the podcasters said, what's your story? You're not having any wine tonight. And I said, no, I'm a retired professional. I like to say that when people ask me. And she, so we got into it a little bit and she's like, you have a story, right? You need to share that story with people. Have you ever thought of starting a podcast? And I'm like, no. Actually, I haven't. And she's like, you would be phenomenal at it, right? And just to be in the room with these people who were all incredibly passionate about helping others and they're collaborating, like, what could we do to get more people listening, to help more people, to get them healthy? And that really inspired me. Like, that was when I was like, maybe I can do this. And so December last year, I started the Road to Health podcast. And then as that started to build, I started to gain confidence because I was doing interviews and I'm like, okay, maybe I can do this, right? And the people that I started to meet as a result invited me into their circle. And they started saying, why don't you write your story, right? And I'd never thought of writing a book. So that same year, I started my coaching business because somebody had asked me to coach them, right? And then I wrote the book, and all this stuff started happening to me. And I was like, maybe, you know what? I'm meant for more. And I think that's when the light bulb went on, was that I always looked at my addiction as something that would hinder my future. But in fact, it became my greatest asset.
Beautifully said. Because so many people look at their past and think that they're always going to stay there. Instead, truly, whatever you've grown through, gotten you to this step so that you can recognize all the opportunities that are in front of you. And you individually, as a teenager, you reacted to not fitting in, not feeling confident, to turning to alcohol. In this case, where you still didn't feel like you fit in at that second, but look at the change that come about, that instead you took an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
What was that learning that you, if you stood in front of someone and said, this is the difference between when I was a teenager to where I stood in 2019 as I'm going to an event, what are the biggest differences that you could point out to someone so that they can see they can go from here to this point?
Start being open minded, first of all. I was very close minded to what was truly possible in my life. And one of the things that I teach on is procrastination. And, we joke around usually when we start talking about procrastination because it's something that all of us do from time to time. But I had been given opportunities throughout my life to do more. And I'd always put it off because there was that fear of failure, right? There was the fear of being rejected, right? Like even asking for a raise at work, I couldn't do that because I was like, what if they say no, right? The fear of, people not agreeing with what I'm doing, right? I needed to learn how to think above the crowd, right? And go, no, this is my journey. And if I can reach 10 people and one person's upset, that's okay. I've touched 10 people in a positive way. So I think it's really investing the time in yourself to do that self discovery. And if you start to feel uncomfortable, that usually means you're growing and that means you're on the right path. And I think a lot of people, like, we talk about being in your comfort zone. I think as miserable as some people are, it's easier for them to stay in that place because it's their comfort. Like for me, it was addiction, than to try something new, right? Because I believe we all have something amazing within us. We just have to tap into what that is. And if you start to, look at things like, what do you love, right? And truly bring out, like, what do you love? And what do people come to you for, right? For advice. And a lot of people, when they ask that question to friends of theirs, they're stunned at what their response is because they look at that. Those things will typically be something that is they perceive as a weakness, but others see as a strength. So it's really tapping into those strengths and what you're good at and what you can bring to the world.
Well said. And from 2019 to today, you've launched a podcast, you've written a book, a bestseller book. What's the name of the book again?
Hope Elevated.
And you also have grown your coaching business to a better level from where you began. Mm-hmm. When most people at this time, with everything that's going on in the world, their thinking is that there are no opportunities, there are no this. What is it in you and in the coaching that you do that helps someone to move from thinking that there's nothing out there to like, yeah, I can do this? What is that?
The first phrase that I mention to people is, we are what we think. And I think about that every single day because I used to wake up in the morning and I'd be like, oh, it's only Monday or it's only Tuesday, right? And so when you think that constantly, right? Yeah, it is only Monday, it is only Tuesday. So you have to first work on your thoughts because our thoughts are so incredibly powerful, and I watched people in my life that were extremely negative. They can't get out of that negativity because they are what they think, right? And so I think the number one thing, if people want to make that transformation, they have to be ready for it. You know, they have to, if they're sick and tired of being sick and tired, you have to say, well, I do everything that it takes to be truly fulfilled and happy in life, because that's what it's all about, right? I think we're lacking in so many areas of our lives, and we don't take the time to recognize what those areas are, and that always has a greater effect on the whole, right? If you imagine a circle and, you know, one life is lower, you're going to have a bumpy ride kind of thing. And so it's really acknowledging, what are those areas of lack in my life and where could I start to work on? And a lot of times it's self-care, right? It's family, not doing stuff for yourself. I mean, I have close friends that are mothers, and they're like, well, I don't have time to do anything because they're always taking their kids everywhere. Well, what happens when mom can't do that anymore, right? So you need to really start looking at what's important in your life and really get that, you know, we are what we think, and start to think differently.
And when you launched the podcast, did you know everything that you needed to know about launching a podcast?
No, no. I Google was my best friend. YouTube. I was very fortunate that I had Adam as well. So I would just reach out to people and say, "Hey, I need help." Like, it's amazing who will help you when you ask them to, and especially in this space, as you know, right? We met each
Yeah.
other through a group, and you can say one thing and I don't know how to do this, and somebody will call you and say, hey, I can help you, right? It's like this community of people that just lift you up. But yeah, there was a lot of learning curves, but now I actually like to share that information with other people and help them, even though that's not even in the direction that I'm going in.
But it's part of your journey of also growing through everything that you're doing
Yeah.
by being that person of service. And that's why you turn around and do that. What about the book? Did you have every knowledge of how to write a book and launch a bestseller book?
I was terrified. I had thought about it earlier this year. And of course, when COVID hit, I was like, okay, well, now I have extra time on my hand because I'm not spending time in airports or commuting or traveling. And so it had gotten brought up to me, you know, why don't you write your story? And I'm like, I barely passed English 12, right? I was not a very good student, so I thought it was just because I didn't apply myself. And I had blogged when I first got sober and I really enjoyed it. So I'm like, okay, you know what? Like, what's the worst thing? I write out this book and I send it to an editor and they fix it and make it look pretty. So I actually, one of my mentors, Allison Melody, she was holding a 14-week to bestseller with Laura Peterson, and they help people launch their books, right? That's what Laura does. And they're like, you know, Tamar, now's your chance. Like, you could write this book. And they had the belief in me that I could, which helped me, right? It helped fuel me. And I was in a group again, right? A support group to help me do that. And I just, once I had my mind fixated on it, I just did it. I wrote it, and I had to go to therapy a few times through writing the book because a whole bunch of stuff came up that I've long since pushed away. So thank goodness for my therapist. But I just did it. I just put my mind to something, and because I didn't want to be the person that procrastinates all the time, I'm like, I'm spending 2 hours each and every day. And honestly, the day that I launched that book was probably the biggest high I've ever experienced in my life. And I've experienced a lot of them, but that was so profound.
What is the best thing about where you are today?
That excitement of watching people gain the belief, right? And seeking out their true potential, right? When I work with a client today, just when that light goes on and they discover what their purpose is and what they truly want in their life, that fills my cup. I love to go to bed early each and every day. I love it because I wake up at 4 a.m. every day, and I do that with purpose because that I work full time as well. And so that time between 4 and 7 a.m., that's my time. That's my time to create content for people. That's my time to connect with people. And I'm so fired up in the morning. If it gets late at night and I'm out with some friends or something, which I don't go out very often, I will get anxiety because I'm like, hey guys, like I got to get up at 4 and I'm going to get 8 hours of sleep tonight, right? But I'm so excited about life because when you do things that help others, it's incredible the feeling you get.
What is one thing you're still working on, possibly within you?
Getting over that fear of failure and imposter syndrome, because even though things like I feel like right now I'm riding this wave, right, of being 100% out of my comfort zone, right? But it feels good for the first time in a long time. It's actually, I'm riding that wave and I'm like, this is good, right? The discomfort is growth. But there are still days where, I'll sit and go, okay, like for example, I do training all the time, weekly, a couple times a week, and sometimes I get asked to share. And so I listen to everybody and they sound very educated. And when I share, it's almost like I have this out of body experience. And I'm thinking, what did I just say? Right? But the funny part is when people hear me share, they're like, wow, you sound very clear and concise and put together. But that's not how I feel all the time. And so I think for me, it's just the difference is I work through that fear now. I don't let it stop me. I know that I'm going to be a full-time coach. I know that I'm going to help people full-time. I want to train and mentor other coaches as well so we can help more people in the world. I just know it within my soul that fear that I still struggle with every so often that creeps up, the imposter syndrome, I kind of push it away and it's like, okay, you know what? You had your little time. I felt you for a second there. I acknowledged you. Bye-bye.
I hope people are catching all these incredible nuggets that you're putting out there, that even though you've had incredible success, launched a podcast, launched a best-selling book, have an incredible coaching program, you still go through your own things, yet you work through them and you continue moving forward. And that's what a lot of people are missing, is that piece that everything doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
You just need to keep moving forward. Tamar, what is the best way for our listeners and viewers to get a hold of you? And I will put stuff in the show notes, but let them hear it.
The number one way is go to my website, which is www.theroadforward.ca. And all my social media links are there. I have my workshops, everything that I offer. The podcast is also there, but the podcast is called The Road to Health. And you can find that on, Apple Podcast and all the different platforms. So I'm available there.
And who do you look for your podcast? What type of people do you like to feature on your podcast?
I love featuring people who have gone through adversity and who have struggled, but who have gained the belief in their own ability to change. So they're doing something great for the world, right? They can teach my listeners that it's possible to change no matter what you've been through.
I love it because we're all on the same path journey, in a sense, where we've gone through something, yet we've moved forward with it and are turning around to go, let me share with you so you can move forward. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the listeners that I may not have asked you?
Just don't give up. Keep doing things every single day that move you forward, right? Even if it's the smallest thing and you don't think it's relevant, celebrate the wins and just take one step forward at a time.
Tamar, thank you so much for being with me here today. I really appreciate your time and energy. And to all the listeners and viewers, remember guys, your attitude determines your altitude in life. If you want things to begin to change for you, start looking at your attitude of how you apply yourself to everything. And we look forward to seeing you in our next episode. Thanks, Tamar. Have a great one.
Thanks for having me.